So congratulations on the new film.
Thanks, Ross.
For this film, everyone knows you from His and Hers as your kind of feature debut. What did you want to do next, and how did you end up here with this film?
Okay, very good question. I heard mention earlier that I may have dithered for a while before I made this film. Really, I you know yourself as a filmmaker that sometimes looking for projects, it's a bit like rooting around in the wilderness. You're not quite sure what kind of direction to take and where the way out is. And I had an idea. It was about exploring how mothers influence masculinity. That was the original. When I sat down, I was like, okay, now, of course, this is driven from my own personal space as well. And I thought it'd be really interesting to explore this. And then I thought, why don't we kind of structure it around all these men in uniforms? Because that's kind of a real masculine thing, to wear a uniform, be it for the army, the police, fire brigade, and all this. I thought, oh, that signals masculine. Anyway, so the film was called Men in Uniform, which is far cry from this. As the film progressed during the research phase, I just became again more drawn to the relationships men were having with their mothers and the stories that were emerging in that phase, which is the research phase. And honestly, that's a lot can happen during that once you get sucked in and you start to explore, but you tend to be drawn back to what you're most comfortable with and what excites you and what you feel that, and the type of film that you could build and create that would be the strongest. And as interesting as the other film sounds, it would be much more academic and probably much heavier a kind of beast than I would be comfortable with ultimately. And I think I would have just got lost in that. And I did resort to something that I know something about, because I have a relationship with my own mum, and I could draw down on my relationship, what my brothers experience, and it would at least be something that I could engage other people with. I could bring a little bit of my own story to the table when discussing it with characters, because I think as a filmmaker, you have to, when you're out there introducing your project to people, you kind of have to put your own experiences on the table as well and share those, and that's the good and the bad and the ugly and so on. And so I think that's where we got to.
And this film takes you to Oklahoma, which is kind of a far cry from His and Hers, which was sort of set in the area that you grew up in.
Well, it's the Midlands of Ireland, His and Hers, and here I've kind of gone to a similar world. It's a forgotten world, like the Midlands often is in Ireland. It's a Midwest. I mean, it's a southern state. It's in the Bible Belt, and Oklahoma is an unusual world to have landed in. But the film was going to be created around a radio show as its structure. I was going to have a beginning, middle, and end via this kind of radio construct. And we found our radio show host in Oklahoma. And that was random, because Joe Cristiano we found on YouTube. He had 6 views. And we thought, okay, he's definitely the small town character, but where is he? Because he was a quintessentially New Yorker. He sounded like Woody Allen character. And when we rang him up, he explained that he'd fallen in love many years ago with a wonderful lady from Oklahoma, and had moved and was based in Tulsa. So that kind of put the cat amongst the pigeons, because it was like, okay, Oklahoma, I know nothing about this place. So we started to explore a little bit more and discovered that it had been voted in this kind of magazine poll as the manliest state in America. I suppose that was really, the criteria would have been if you had a pickup truck, carried a gun, supported a football team, basic stuff. But for our purposes, that was a bit of a eureka moment too, because we're like, yay, that kind of brings it all back to this idea of masculinity and the relationship men have with their mothers and what impact that has had on their being and so on. And it just seemed to all fit. Suddenly it was like, okay. And then we discovered, Oklahoma was going to be an interesting state to find characters in, and it kind of surprised us in many respects, because we would have had the same ideas, I suppose. A lot of people would consider this world a bit backwards, redneck, and certainly even the East and the West Coast of America, having made this film and screened it over there, you kind of start to realize, oh gosh, they have the same idea of this place as we do. And yet, when we got there and we started to meet these people, we started to engage with their worlds, they were no different to us. They were, their relationships were there was no difference at all. Like.
So you're exploring, Oklahoman men's relationships with their mothers. You've filmed in your home place. How did you find they received you? Because I suppose if you're filming where you're from, then people kind of immediately have an affinity with you, perhaps. How did you find that in terms of the people of Oklahoma? You going over there, you trying to get access to them?
Okay, that's a good question. Firstly, going back to the very original question about his and hers, I was a little bit wary of the fact, because that film had been quite successful and a lot of people would have complimented me on my rapport with women, and I was starting to think, maybe I can only do this with women. I can only sit down and have conversations, and the banter and the intimacy. But I quickly started to understand that, firstly, an outsider it can be easier for an outsider in that context. With men, men are so rarely asked about their emotions that sometimes they're delighted as relieved, and maybe it was an opportunity for them to speak openly. And because we were outsiders, we were creating a film for, essentially we were aliens, Irish people. None of the people we would have been with, apart from I think one character and Joe, would have met Irish people. So we were exotic, we were different. Our accents enthralled them and
right.
amused them and so on. So I think that would have helped in many respects. And we just, the crew, there were two ladies, so there was two ladies and two guys. So it was a good mix, we're introducing, it wasn't, I don't know, it just all seemed to fit into place with everyone. And I know it's kind of easy for me to say that we got on with everybody, but we did. It was... You were a
little bit apprehensive.
Oh yeah,
but
I was worried that I wouldn't be able to connect with these American men. Different culture. And as I said, I'd had such a good rapport with women before that I thought maybe I can't sit down and talk to men in the same way. But it all happened just naturally and seamlessly, really. When I was thrown into the pit of, these random cowboys, I managed to kind of survive.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate. For example, the cowboys, you ultimately kind of, you use everything that you have to connect to people, everything, all your experiences. And for example, cowboys, I come from a farm. I can actually talk cattle. I can talk about shorthorns. They would be like, what, and I could actually talk about, the breeding of cattle and stuff like this. It'd be quite limited, but it was enough to engage and to kind of, I suppose just have a bit of banter before you'd start asking the more personal, intimate questions.
Were there creative things that you wanted to do differently than his and hers? I suppose to move your skill base along, to move your filmmaking along, were there things that you were trying to introduce to this that were new from your point of view?
Yes, I think I did. We spoke about the construction via a radio show. I think it was, his and hers is a very linear film. It moves, there's an obvious beginning and there's an obvious end. It is only one way it could go. Here I was pushing myself editorially because I knew I was going to be doing it myself. I was going to be editing, physically working on the piece, and I decided to use a radio show and I suppose connect it all together with a character the radio show host. I think that was something different. I introduced scenarios where I'm putting people together in his and hers. I had just single characters. I suppose from a filmmaking perspective, I'm taking baby steps. I'm moving a little bit forward, I hope. I mean, people will see the film and hopefully think there has been some progression in my filmmaking. But I definitely went out with that aspiration. I really did. And when it came to the edit, it proved very difficult for me. I did struggle a lot and I got a lot of outside help with it and advice, and I screened it several times to poor people who had to suffer a film that did not work. That was like, so, but really now that I see it on screen and now that, it's out there, I feel that's the film that I was actually making while I was out shooting it. That was the film I was making. For some reason, I got a little bit scared when I went into the edit room because I thought I have to make this different to his and hers or something. But ultimately, I came back to where where I thought it was originally going to go, and I forgot about everything else, and I just wanted the film to work.
Okay, and finally, then, his and hers had a very obvious connection for Irish audiences. They could see their own mother, maybe. Or sister or daughter in the characters that you portrayed. With this film, it's set somewhere else. Maybe it's a little bit different. How will Irish audiences connect with it, or what's there for them?
Well, I think like his and hers, there's a lot of heart and humour and tenderness in it. I think one thing that people will walk out of that cinema with and say that, well, there's no difference in relationships, be it, middle America to us in Ireland. And I think, I'm really excited about the humour in there. I think audiences will laugh. They will be moved. There are lots and lots of interesting and unique characters in there. And something I would say that I'm really proud of is that as filmmakers, there is a tendency to go into this world and sensationalize it, to go for the extremes of characters. And yes, there are extreme people in Oklahoma. There are wacky people in Oklahoma, but that's not this film. I looked for the universal, the characters that will resonate with a farmer in Offaly or a businessman in the IFSC. These people will connect with you because their relationships that they have as mother and son are very universal, very familiar, and I would hope Irish audiences will laugh and be moved by this film in the same way as they would be by any other film set in Ireland, Africa or beyond.
I'm sure they will. It's a brilliant film, so best of luck with it.
Thank you.